You know, usually when you pack for a trip to a country near the equator, there's a pretty standard expectation.
Oh, for sure. You pack some shorts, maybe a swimsuit, and you basically just prepare to sweat.
Exactly. You figure, well, I'm on the equator, so I know exactly what the climate is going to do. It's a very um, horizontal way of thinking about the world.
Right. It's that comforting latitude-based logic. Like if you're on the equator, you're hot. If you're near the poles, you're freezing.
But then you look at Colombia, and that linear logic is just completely thrown out the window. I mean, you could easily find yourself packing a thick wool sweater and like a heavy winter coat for a city that sits almost directly on the equatorial line.
Which is just wild to think about.
It really is. So, welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at Colombia, and specifically, we've been going through this incredibly detailed 4K travel documentary transcript. It completely shatters how we think about geography.
It really does. It's fascinating source material.
Yeah, and our mission today, for you listening, is to synthesize all these notes and figure out how one single concept, which is verticality, shapes absolutely everything about a nation's identity, its biodiversity, and just, its daily life.
And it makes for a phenomenal case study. When you go through this documentary, you're forced to rethink how the physical environment dictates human behavior.
Yeah.
Geography here isn't just a backdrop, it's actually the main character.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting with a bit of a historical quirk from our notes. Colombia is the only country in South America named after Christopher Columbus.
Right.
But here's the kicker. The guy never actually set foot there. Not even once.
Wait, really? Not once?
Not a single time. It was actually the 18th century revolutionary Francisco de Miranda who proposed the name. He wanted this grand symbolic tribute to the whole continent. So Columbus totally missed the most geographically chaotic piece of the puzzle.
What's fascinating here is that the real story of Colombia isn't about who sailed past it. It's about what happens when you actually hit the land itself. Because yes, it's the only South American country to border both the Pacific Ocean and the Caribbean Sea.
Yeah.
I mean, that's nearly 1,900 miles of coastline.
Which is massive.
It's huge. But the water really isn't the architectural marvel here. The true backbone of this country is the Andes mountain range.
And they don't just, pass through the country.
No, not at all. They basically collide with the continent and literally split into three separate massive branches. You've got the western, central, and eastern Cordilleras.
Wow.
And this geological event generates these extreme elevation changes. You're going from sea level to over 16,400 feet in just a few hundred miles.
That is steep.
Very. You end up with deep river valleys wedged right between towering snow-capped peaks.
Which, I mean, that completely rewrites how time and seasons work for the people living there. I was actually thinking about this while we were reviewing the aerial shots in the source material.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Colombia's geography is basically a giant climate-controlled apartment building.
Ah, I like that.
Right. You don't have spring, summer, fall, and winter progressing on a calendar. You just have floors in the building. So the ground floor is a sauna, the middle floors are spring-like, and the penthouse is a refrigerator. You don't wait for winter to roll around in December, you just drive up a hill.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. Tying and seasons aren't temporal there, they're spatial. Your climate is entirely dependent on your altitude.
So if you take the elevator all the way up to the penthouse of this apartment building, you hit the capital, Bogota.
The penthouse.
Exactly. And it sits suspended at roughly 8,500 feet in elevation with 8 million people living there.
Which is a massive population for that altitude.
It is. And when you see the street level footage, it just defies every tropical stereotype you might have. There are 0 palm trees, the skies are often gray, it rains a lot, and the temperature rarely climbs above 68 degrees Fahrenheit.
Just a constant near-alpine chill.
Yeah. But despite that chill, it's bursting with this intense cultural scene, especially down in the historic La Candelaria district with all those colonial houses and bright murals. And watching over all of it is the Montserrat Sanctuary, sitting way up at 10,341 feet.
It's quite the view from up there.
It really is. The city just looks like an endless carpet of brick rooftops wedged between these green mountains.
But if you take that same elevator down to the ground floor, you step out into a completely different sensory experience. Down in cities like Cali, the heat is a constant 86 degrees or more all year long.
I'd be sweating constantly.
Oh, absolutely. And that heat dictates the culture. When your house is sweltering, social life naturally moves out onto the crowded sidewalks and open-air venues.
Which makes sense.
Right. And this is exactly where salsa, which arrived from the Caribbean in the 1960s, was transformed into this collective identity.
Fair.
Cali developed this rapid footwork style that exists nowhere else. It was basically born out of that humid, open-air, ground-floor energy.
That's so cool. And then on the northern coast, you have Cartagena, where the heat is described as like dense, almost solid.
Yeah, very heavy air.
And this was the port where the gold of the New World sailed to Spain, so it was a massive target for pirates. To defend it, they built this imposing fortress with nearly 7 miles of thick stone walls.
Incredible engineering for the time.
Totally. But right next to that heavy colonial history, you have the Boca Grande district, which looks a lot more like Miami. You've got these sleek skyscrapers and luxury hotels jutting right out of the sea.
So you have the sweltering ground floor and the chilly penthouse.
Yeah.
But situated right in between those, you have the middle floor.
The Goldilocks zone.
Exactly. Medellin sits at 4,900 feet in elevation. And that specific altitude gives it a steady, comfortable climate of around 72 degrees Fahrenheit all year long. It's why they literally call it the city of eternal spring.
I do want to dig into Medellin, though, because our notes point out something really striking. In the 1990s, it was considered one of the most dangerous cities in the world.
It was a very dark period.
But today, it's considered a global case study in urban planning. And the documentary says a massive part of that turnaround is credited to a network of cable cars.
Yep, the metro cable.
Now, I have to push back on this a little bit. I mean, I get that transit is helpful, but how does public transit cure violent crime? That just feels like a massive leap to me.
It does sound like a leap if you're just thinking about, gondolas at a ski resort. But we have to look at the mechanics of extreme geography here. Medellin is built in a very steep valley.
Okay.
And historically, the poorest, most marginalized neighborhoods, like Comuna 13, were pushed up onto the steepest, most inaccessible hillsides. We're talking 45-degree inclines in some places. You can't build a subway there. You can barely even build roads.
So they were physically cut off from the rest of the city down in the valley.
Severely cut off.
Right.
When a neighborhood is geographically isolated by a steep ravine, emergency services can't get in, police can't patrol, and residents can't easily commute to jobs in the economic center.
That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It was. When the state can't reach a neighborhood, illicit organizations step into that vacuum. The physical isolation directly created social and economic isolation, which bred violence.
Ah, I see. So the terrain itself was actually acting as a barrier to opportunity.
Exactly. So by building cable cars and even these massive outdoor escalators right into those steep hillsides, urban planners bypassed the geography entirely. They ended the isolation.
Because a cable car doesn't care how steep the mountain is.
Right, it just goes over it. Suddenly, residents could commute to the valley safely and cheaply. The state could provide a presence and actual services. You remove the isolation, you bring in connection, and the violence dramatically drops.
That is amazing.
Today, Comuna 13 is world famous for its street art and escalators. It's just a perfect example of how human behavior is fundamentally shaped by how we're forced to navigate our terrain.
That makes total sense now. And what's wild is that this extreme vertical architecture doesn't just dictate urban planning, it dictates natural life too. Because of this intense layering of climatic floors, Colombia is the second most biodiverse country on the planet.
Second only to Brazil.
Right. It hosts roughly 10% of all animal and plant species on Earth, including over 1,900 bird species, which, by the way, is more than any other country.
What's really vital to grasp here is the concept of spatial compression. Like we said, Brazil is the most biodiverse country, but it's massive. In Colombia, that biodiversity is compressed into a much smaller surface area.
Because of the verticality.
Exactly. Because the elevation changes so rapidly, you get entirely different biological worlds stacked right on top of each other. A bird can fly for 10 minutes